League Two playoff final is set, and it'll be the two W's. Walsall, Wimbledon, both teams won both playoff semi-final legs as well. Wimbledon beating Notts by a 1-0, both away and at home. Walsall winning 2-0 at Chesterfield, and then 2-1 just about in the end with a late goal in the home game at the Bescot. Two really good games. George, I was at Wimbledon and Notts, so I'll go pretty big on that, I think. But let me hear your take on Walsall Chesterfield, because with a strong first leg performance where they took their chances and they defended their box, and they didn't fold under pressure in the second leg. Far from it, they won the game again. And instead of nerves and bottle jobs and all that sort of stuff, we saw confidence, we saw shape, we saw patterns, and we saw, instead of a lack of confidence, we just saw desire to get the job done, which they did.
When we do our betting preview, one of us has to say they're going to win and one of us has to say they're going to lose, because they, from the beginning of August, have made an absolute mockery of us. In our 1-24s, we had the mid-table. They started the season as if they were the best team of all time. We then did a piece on Football Corner saying they were the best team ever in League Two, and immediately they decided to be absolutely terrible. Then going into the playoffs, and then we did a piece 3 weeks before the end of the season on nt20.com. We both said they were going to win the league still. They're not coming fourth.
Yeah.
We then do our playoff preview. We both say that Chesterfield are going to beat them and they're going to struggle to bounce back. And they put in just two really dominant performances. They have made an absolute mockery of us. And fair play to them. You know, it was interesting talking to John Brady on the How Do You Manage probably put out early this week about this, where, you know, he is someone who has had to go through probably the closest ever comparison to what Walsall went through, not in terms of throwing away the 12-point lead, but purely in terms of thinking they were promoted when their game is drawing to an end, and then having to hear that, well, their game had ended, that a goal elsewhere meant they weren't going to go up. And he spoke about how difficult it was to kind of galvanise his players. And for Sadler to do that under immense scrutiny is just absolutely incredible. And it's the manner of it as well. This was in no way kind of smashy or grabby. This was Walsall stepping up and just being the Walsall we've seen before. Really effective press, solid defensively, clinical for once, finally in front of goal. And I couldn't help when me and you were sitting in the pub last night watching this together thinking, like, yeah, actually, you know what? That was 28 goals scored from 8 XG. Probably should have thought more about that. And they're actually still quite good defensively. And these runs are always going to come undone in terms of when you get incredibly unlucky.
Just to clarify, because I think that incredible find from you was buried. Was that buried in a dag? 28 goals from 8 XG. So just for full context to the listeners and viewers, Walsall conceded their last 28 goals in the regular season from only 8 goals expected, suggesting,
correct,
if you like this sort of thing, that the quality of chances they were giving up was still among the best in the division. Quite frankly, that their shape was still pretty good, and that through. So, go on.
My point on that was to say that when they were 12 points clear on the 24th of January, if you told anybody then that from then to the end of the season they'd concede 8 expected goals, I reckon the odds of them winning the league would have been 1 to 100. I mean, that's an incredible, amazing defensive numbers. And so, there's a piece to be written about their season, to be honest, and about the statistical quirks and what actually happened, because I know that fans will say, we dropped off and everything else, and obviously the woeful finishing form was bad, but the driving force of this, the driving reason why Walsall aren't already a League One side, is because their opposition, for some weird reason, just suddenly got really good at scoring goals against them.
Shall we focus on the match, George? Because I know you can go all day on this, and you have done.
Yeah. So, just on, they were very good in the second leg.
Can I just tee you up by saying...
Yes.
And this is more criticism of us and how we just keep missing stuff when it comes to Walsall. We're so blinded by the end of the season. And, I don't apologise for that at all. I don't think many people would have picked them to beat Chesterfield. And that's, snapped a lot of playoff predictions and brackets, including ours. But with the benefit of hindsight and having watched these two teams play against each other twice in the last week, just a good matchup for Walsall. Like a really good stylistic and squad profile matchup where from the very first minute of the first game, Walsall managed to break in behind and showed pace that Chesterfield don't have. And pretty much throughout, aside from also the excellent tactical shape and the fact that they flood the centre of the pitch and made it very difficult for Chesterfield to build any good attacks, just the athleticism of the team in comparison to Chesterfield's kind of dad's army was just very notable, and that's a big factor in football.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's just it was the way they approached the two legs. Like even last night, the energy of which they like the first 5 minutes, they absolutely dominated. Like they pressed Chesterfield into oblivion, despite carrying a 2-goal lead into the game. I think that's a really key point about both, Walsall and Wimbledon that maybe deserves in the preview pod. It's just, I thought the way that they both managed their leads at home was absolutely incredible in terms of the way they set up. And maybe, Regis Slibbery watching that would have been like, oh yeah, maybe that's what we should have done. The moment of the game here before we talk about Chesterfield, and maybe the moment of the whole playoffs, like Ballard is the one that will win all the awards. But if I can take you from the Oscars to Sundance, Albert Adoma's
the Mercury Prize goes to
assist. Well, you've got to cross different mediums there. I
just meant it's the niche. It's kind of often goes for the non-obvious, right?
Yeah. Yes. The Albert Adoma assist is just a thing of like just the whole story is insane. Where he's a 37-year-old and someone who's played a lot in the Premier League. He's played
2 games.
Sorry, he's played 2 in 22
I think this is a bad start for you here because I think he's 38. No, he's 37. Fine, you're right on that one.
That's 1-1. He's played the most. Is it the most championship games of anyone or second?
The most championship games since the rebrand in 04. Yeah.
There you go. The most of anybody. He has chosen, having played for his boyhood QPR, he easily could have hung up his boots, but he decided to go to Walsall. And, they've just conceded a goal, which, it doesn't matter. They just conceded. And he gets the ball on the right-hand side and just decides, age 37, that he wants to show everyone what he can still do. And he showboats to like an absolutely disgusting degree. Then shows a serious turn of pace. Is it McFadden tries to foul him, and he just goes, "No, I'm not going to go down and take the easy penalty. I'm going to stay on my feet." Or free kick, and then it's just the cross is like a stabbed toe poke dink. It's just an absolutely absurd way to score a goal, to win a tie, or to win a game that sends you to Wembley. Hats off to him. It's probably one of my favourite moments of the whole season. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely glorious, and Walsall head to Wembley and fully deserve it. And from a Chesterfield point of view, look, they got promoted from the National League last year. They've got a big budget for this level as well. They've got the squad to show for it. That squad was just chopped apart through injuries and inconsistency of team selection all season. Finished strong to make the playoffs, but we'll have to go again in League Two next year. And they're an interesting one because part of me just thinks Paul Cook with a big budget, which clearly they have, is a bit of a force of nature at this level. And I think had they managed to keep a more consistent team, they'd have finished higher than 7th and possibly challenged for automatics. But it is the most insanely old squad. Like there aren't, I can't think of many teams like it in terms of having a dozen players who are over 30. I haven't checked what the contract situation is, but that might limit what they're able to do in the market this summer. They're obviously a team that has pulling power as well when it comes to loanees. Like Metcalfe, for example, has looked really good for them when it comes to certain young players like Dobra. They're not all old. I should point that out, but not quite sure what to expect from them this summer. But I do think they'll be one of the favourites for the title next season, quite frankly, and I certainly wouldn't disagree with that right now. We need to, at some point, or maybe just now, very quickly mention that the issue that we have in the EFL in particular at the moment, but across the whole game, with goalkeepers being able to delay the game very, very easily by going down injured and asking the referee for the physios to come on, which gives everyone a break for a couple of minutes, and in many cases gives the manager a chance to get his team regroup, tweak tactics, which is clearly one of the great things about football, is that during the game you can't do a team talk, you can't really change your tactics unless you can verbalise it from the touchline while the game's still going on. It's really, really rubbish for so many different reasons, both sporting and as a product. And unfortunately, I'm using the Walsall-Chesterfield game here because Simkin did it a couple of times over both games. I don't particularly want to focus on Simkin or Walsall because pretty much every team has done it this season. This is one of those where you think something has to change, and then you try and work out what that could be, and it's quite difficult to work out what sort of rule you could impose here because clearly you can't We were talking in the pub last night after a few beers. Can you make an outfielder wear the gloves for a minute if the keeper goes down? Well, no, that's a bit ridiculous. I don't particularly see why you couldn't impose a blanket rule which says you can't do anything the first time. Of course you can't. Like, you really can't do anything about that because goalies do sometimes get injured and need to see the physio. I think if a goalkeeper does it for the second time in a game, they should have to be substituted. The argument being, essentially, if you feel the need to go down twice for a physio, you've got an injury and therefore you should come off. And even though clearly there's loopholes in this and, a keeper isn't always injured after two, I think it's just a massive deterrent. I think it would solve it.
Yeah, my issue.
I think it would go some distance. Nice.
I think it might go the other way. Well, I actually think if you think about it, if you're Simpkin and you've gone down already and the clock is 92 and you've got a 1-goal lead to defend, you go down again, that's just even better time wasting. You can go down, you get the treatment, you then have to be taken off, you then have the substitute coming on. I reckon it would take longer and you therefore would probably end up benefiting more.
Well, let's try it, because frankly, it's a shambles at the moment. And
yeah,
I don't know if you came up with a better idea in the shower, but I don't really know what's realistic.
I still think I think second time, as you say, first time fine, second time they have to go off and get treatment off the field and you have to give the gloves to an outfield player until the ball goes out of play again. Just same rules for everybody.
Amazing. Okay, well, Wimbledon will play Walsall Bank Holiday Monday in the playoff final at Wembley. They beat Notts 1-0 again. They have had Notts' number in the regular season, certainly in the home game at Plough Lane, and in both semis to an extent, as discussed on the first leg's recap with Matt. Notts County did create probably the three best chances of the game in the first leg, and it was their wastefulness and some incredible goalkeeping and last-ditch defending that kept them at bay. But here, they didn't. They created more chances in the first leg than they did at the second leg, and that's really tough to swallow from a Notts fan point of view. I was sitting very close to the Notts fans here, just to the side of the media bit. I was kind of media overflow, which I think sums me up quite well. And the Notts fans were absolutely sensational. I actually couldn't believe it, partly because I know from socials and from Notts fans that I speak to that there's been a dismay, there's been an unhappiness about the way that the team's played. And in some quarters, that's focused at the manager. Some quarters, it's not so much of a spotlight on him, but just a general feeling that over the last few months in particular, they've not been watching a good team. And it's been a team that's frustrated them, and they didn't expect much from these playoffs. And what they were served up was probably even worse than they expected, where they haven't scored a goal across the two legs. And they didn't really achieve anything today, despite having 75% possession. So it's something that they've seen time and time again. And I thought there'd be some, in the flesh anger. And it wasn't at all. There was complete support of the players. At full time, the whole end stood up and applauded and thanked the players for a season where, let's remember, they finished in the top 7. It's finished poorly, and it hasn't gone as well as they wanted. They finished in the top 7. Last season they were mid-table. That is progression, even if you can't necessarily see it on the pitch at the moment. But there's no doubt they were very, very poor, very, very disappointing. I mean, trying to get back into a game when you're behind against Wimbledon is like when one of my terriers picks up a bone in the park and they have to try and get the bone out of their mouth, and it just, it's difficult. It's difficult at best. And that's how Notts found it. Wimbledon's shape very, very good. They had the best chances in the game. They scored a wonderful goal from Josh Neufville, helped by some really poor defending from, I think it was Macari, who left the ball over his head. Neufville with the first touch, which cushioned it up for him to lift it over Bass on the volley. Really nice trajectory on it. As soon as it left his foot, it was either going wide or looping in perfectly. And Neufville's probably Wimbledon's player of the season. I think he did win that award. So it's nice for him to have that moment as well, particularly in a playoff campaign where he's been asked to do something that he's never really been asked to do before. This is a guy that's always played as a wide forward, as a winger. Jackson has converted him into a wing-back in their system, 3-5-2, and it's worked really, really well. They've got plenty out of him from an attacking sense, but he has more than stood up to the test defensively, and that's always a question mark about wingers, right, when you try and convert them to full-back or wing-back roles. He, in this playoffs, has played basically a man-marking job on Jody Jones. Not quite as strict as that, but by what I mean is when Jones started on the right, Neufville started on Wimbledon's left. When Jones switched over to the left at the end of the first half, Neufville switched over to defend Jones. So he was given the task of defending Notts County's best player, and he did a really good job over both legs as well. So Neufville, the star, But as always, realistically, it's Wimbledon's team unit that is their star. They do a really good job of defending leads, as we've discussed a bit over the last few weeks, and they did so here. Defended their box well. Marcus Brown had 2 great chances streaking away on the break at the start of the second half. It could have looked a lot more straightforward, and frankly, it did look quite straightforward in the end, George.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were the better team, basically, in the second leg. Kind of similar to Walsall, where it would be easy to try and defend their lead, especially because they're a team who, especially at home, have relied on their defensive work so well. But I thought in the second half in particular, the way that they took the game, well, they just kind of dominated. They dominated territory. They created the better chances. It felt like a second goal in the game and a third goal in the tie was more likely at all times compared to them. So, yeah, I think Johnny Jackson deserves immense credit. Both Jackson and Sadler came into the playoffs under pressure that we're not used to seeing managers come under when they're going into a playoff campaign. And I'm really interested to know, given how many fans seemingly wanted them both out from their respective clubs, how much that's changed over the last 2 games. Because more so than I think most playoff wins, I think the impact and the decision making and the way that both Sadler and Jackson set their teams up for their games, I'd almost say that more than any player, they were the 2 most important reasons why they progressed. So credit to them.
And I like unusual, funky things. I like to point out when centre-backs score from open play. I like to point out things like that. We had a real all-timer here, George, which it's a real unicorn moment, this. Goalkeeper taking a throw-in. Absolutely loved it. I think a couple of people sitting around me thought I was an absolute fruitcake because I genuinely, not so chasing the game. Bass is outside his box. It gets cleared out for a throw, quite close to halfway. No one else is near it, so he just legs it after it with his gloves on. Lovely little powerful throw into the feet of the centre-back. Absolutely
lovely little powerful throw is an amazing sentence.
Lovely little powerful throw. It's been a day. Great atmosphere at Plough Lane. Probably the biggest game that new stadium has seen, and the fans turned up as well as the Notts County fans that I mentioned earlier. So everyone did themselves justice, I would say, other than Notts as a team, who I hope I don't have to watch them play like that next season, because it's a really tough watch, and I sympathise with the fans. Yes, they were missing Jatta and McGoldrick, but frankly they look like this even with those 2 players in the team. And I just can't understand that while I understand that I don't know as much about tactics as football managers, and almost in every case I would trust their judgment over my own, I have always hated watching Austin play left wing back for Notts County. To my eyes, Austin is a central midfielder who is broadly similar to most of Notts' other central midfielders. He's kind of okay at everything, but not dynamic, can't beat a man, doesn't really play a killer pass, doesn't really score, isn't particularly unbelievable defensively. He's just an all-rounder. For him to play as a right footer at left wing back, I cannot understand that for a moment. And maybe there were, absences. I see that Gordon and Cerula weren't available here, but Jarvis is there who can play wing back, even if he's more of an attacker. It's just so tough to watch a team that has to break a team down, and all attacks just die as soon as they get to one side of the pitch. So I don't mean that as criticism of Austin per se, because that's not his position, but I've seen him play there so many times and I just don't understand it whatsoever. So Notts will be in League 2 again next season. Wimbledon, maybe, but they may not be. That'll be decided at Wembley on Bank Holiday Monday when they take on Walsall. Our playoff final preview podcast will be out in the middle of next week, and it'll be very in-depth tactical stuff. I think Walsall-Wimbledon is a fascinating matchup and really, really interesting League 2 playoff final. So make sure you join us for that. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone else.
Thank you, mate.
Go well.